Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Today, my group will be presenting about Staphylococcus aureus food poisoning. Our group members consist of Nur Aisha, Nur Kamarina, Nurul Airin, and me, Ahmad Hazi. Next slide. First off, we will be introducing Staphylococcus aureus.
My name is Kamarina, and I want to introduce what is Staphylococcus aureus. So, Staphylococcus aureus is a member of the family Staphylococci and is capable of infecting all non-mammalian species, including human. Also, it can be found in the noses of about 32% of healthy adults, usually for a short time, and on the skin, about 20%. Because of Staphylococcus aureus is commonly present on skin, improper hand washing before handling food can lead to food contamination, and the bacteria can grow and produce toxin if the meal is then allowed to come to room temperature using Staphylococcus, causing staphylococcal food poisoning, SFP. So the definition is staphylococcal food poisoning, SFP, caused by the ingestion of preformed enterotoxin produced by Staphylococcus aureus. And the contamination of food is most commonly attributed to food handlers who carry Staphylococcus aureus on their skin or in their nasal passages. And SFP occur when a person consumes food containing sufficient amounts of one or more preformed staphylococcal enterotoxin. Also, food for the outbreak include dairy products and protein-rich food, such as chicken, ham, and other meats. In fact, contamination often results from improper food handling or temperature abuse, which allow bacterial growth and toxin production in pre-contaminated food. However, contaminated food may not appear spoiled, look normal, and lack any unusual odor. And also, the onset of illness usually begin shortly after consumption of the contaminated food, within 30 minutes to 8 hours after ingestion of the contaminated food, due to the rapid action of the preformed toxin. Also, most commonly experienced symptoms are usually nausea, vomiting, abdominal cramping, diarrhea, while headache and prostration are less frequent. And the illness normally goes away on its own by 24 to 48 hours after it first manifests. However, it can be severe enough to require hospitalization, especially in involving young children, the elderly, or individuals with weakened immune system. The next is the characteristic of the Staphylococcus aureus. So Staphylococcus aureus are cocci shaped, often grouped in cluster, and also a type of gram-positive bacteria, non-motile and non-spore forming. Also facultative anaerobe, which can grow with or without oxygen. And also the optimum growth occur between 37 Celsius, but it can still grow within a wider range of 8 to 48 Celsius. And common biochemical tests used for identification for this microbe is including catalase positivity, coagulase positivity, novobiosine sensitivity, and mannitol fermentation. And also, this microbe generally kill by cooking temperatures. Also, the toxin producing toxigenic Staphylococcus aureus may survive insufficient heating or post-cooking contamination, and the toxin formed when the food is kept under warm and moist condition for some time. And the optimal temperature for toxin production is 20 to 37 Celsius. Also, it can grow in food with high salt and sugar concentration. For this, Staphylococcus aureus produce a strong gastrointestinal toxin during active growth, which is enterotoxin. And also, this toxin will remain active even in very small amounts, which is from nanogram to microgram levels. Also, it heat resistant and acid resistant, which can survive cooking and stomach acid. It also not destroyed by enzymes in the digestive system, so they can active after ingestion. Also, Staphylococcus has a very strong ability to develop antibiotic resistance through several mechanisms. Just firstly, it uses efflux pumps to push antibiotics out of the cell. Also, it change its target protein so the antibiotics can't attach properly. And the third one is it produces enzymes that break down and or deactivate other antibiotics. Also, the is spread through genetic mutation, selection of resistant strains, and horizontal gene transfer, which means it can get resistant genes from other bacteria or viruses called bacteriophage. I will pass to Haziq to explain about the sources and transmission.
As said, I will be explaining the sources of Staphylococcus aureus. Staphylococcus aureus can come from many sources, including humans. This is due to Staphylococcus aureus being part of normal human flora, generally found on the skin and mucous membranes, such as the throat, nasal cavity, and the digestive system. Staphylococcus aureus does not usually cause infection on healthy skin. However, if the skin is cut or broken, it can breach into the bloodstream or internal tissue, which can cause infection. An estimated half of adult human population is colonized, and certain populations have a colonization rate of up to 80%. This includes healthcare workers, frequent users of needles, such as diabetic patients, as well as immunocompromised individuals. Other than humans, Staphylococcus aureus can also infect many species of livestock, especially livestock used for meat. Meat-producing animals such as pigs, chicken, and cattle are carriers of Staphylococcus aureus. Therefore, their products such as beef, pork, and poultry can be sources of Staphylococcus aureus. Staphylococcus aureus is also found naturally in the environment on surfaces. Next, I will be continuing with the transmissions of Staphylococcus aureus. Staphylococcus aureus is able to spread through direct contact as well as fomites known as passive vectors. Although Staphylococcus aureus is incapable of producing spores, it can still be transmitted easily because it is very resilient. It is highly resilient against desiccation as well as dry and hostile environments. So, improper or prolonged handling of food products can be more susceptible to becoming contaminated with Staphylococcus aureus because it can survive for a prolonged period of time on surfaces and skin from, from a range of 7 days up to a few months, increasing risk of cross-contamination. Next, I will leave it to Noor Irene.
Next, I will explain on how Staphylococcus enterotoxin or SEs and inside our intestinal tract. Firstly, food poisoning begins when a person eats food contaminated with Staphylococcus aureus or its toxin. These toxins are usually produced in food that were improperly stored or handled. What makes this toxin dangerous is that they are very stable, as it can survive heat and are resistant to our stomach proteolytic enzyme, which means even after cooking or digestion, this toxin remain active. This results in the toxin reaching the intestinal tract in active form. Next. After the toxin reach the intestinal tract, they start to interact directly with the intestinal cells. The staphylococcal enterotoxin attaches to the surface of epithelial cells in the intestine. This attachment disrupts the integrity of the intestinal lining as it increases the permeability of the intestine and cause fluid to leak into the intestinal lumen, resulting to gastrointestinal symptoms such as abdominal pain, nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. Next. Acids also trigger the mast cells that are formed in the intestinal wall. This cell then release histamine, which causes inflammation and contribute to symptoms like abdominal discomfort. Moreover, acids also stimulate the release of serotonin, the neurotransmitter that activates the vomiting reflex. Now let's look at the superantigens effect and how this leads to immune system overactivation. Superantigen acids bind directly to T cell receptor and MHC class II molecules on antigen presenting cell. This causes abnormal immune activation and overactivation of T cells, which lead to an excessive immune response. As a result, a huge amount of cytokines, such as interleukin-2, tumor necrosis factor alpha, and interferon gamma are released, resulting in diarrhea, fluid secretion, and inflammation. Now, I will pass to Aisha.
Hello. Hello, I'm Aisha, and I'll be presenting about the treatment plan and management of Staphylococcus aureus food poisoning. Before we dive into the treatment plan, let's take a look at the symptoms that have been mentioned earlier. As we may already know, the symptoms will appear rapidly between 1 to 6 hours after the consumption of the contaminated food. And the most common symptoms are diarrhea, abdominal cramps, nausea, and vomiting. And some people also experience mild headache, dehydration, and occasionally fever. Next. Now, let's take a look at the treatment plan. The primary mainstay of treatment for Staphylococcus aureus are focusing on supportive care and symptoms therapy. There are three main treatments that I would like to highlight here. The first one is rehydration. This treatment primarily focusing on fluid replenishment and electrolyte loss that was caused by vomiting and diarrhea. This treatment involves using oral rehydration therapy and drinking huge amount of water or electrolyte drinks. For certain cases, like severe vomiting and diarrhea, intravenous fluid administration is needed. The next one is medication therapy. The use of medication is encouraged to help with the symptoms. For an example, anti-emetic drug like metoclopramide could help with severe nausea and vomiting cases. On the other hand, antidiarrheal medication are not advised as it might slow down the toxin removal process from our body. And lastly, sufficient rest is also important to help with speedy recovery, especially after food poisoning. Next. Now, let's take a look at the management whenever an outbreak cases happen. So, if several people are affected from the same food source, the case must be reported to the Ministry of Health or KKM, which is Kementerian Kesihatan Malaysia. This will allow the health official to investigate the outbreak, identify the food sources, and prevent more cases. And the authorities also can trace food handlers for possible carriers of Staphylococcus aureus. And anyone who tested positive will receive treatment and are temporarily restricted from food handling until they are cleared. Next. Following that, we'll move on to the last part, which is the preventive measure. So the first, to prevent future cases, good hygiene and safe food handling are very important. Food handlers are encouraged to wash their hands properly, wear gloves, and avoid preparing food with open mouths. For the food handling and storage, they are encouraged to cook food should be stored properly, refrigerated within 2 hours, and make sure it's cooked thoroughly before serving. And lastly, always ensure that all kitchen utensils and surface are clean and sanitized before and after use. They could also keep garbage bin covered and emptied regularly to prevent bacterial spread. By following these simple steps, Staphylococcus aureus food poisoning can be effectively prevented. So then I will pass back to Irene to presenting about cases in Malaysia.
The first case, a foodborne outbreak occurred during a mass gathering in the Petaling district, Selangor on October 6, 2019. A total of 169 individuals were affected. The exposure time was estimated to start around 7 a.m., with the first case onset reported at 8:30 a.m. and the last case occurred at 6:30 p.m. The main symptoms reported among the affected individuals were vomiting, diarrhea, and abdominal pain, which are also typical signs of foodborne intoxication caused by Staphylococcus aureus enterotoxin. These symptoms appeared quite rapidly after food consumption, which align with the short incubation period of Staphylococcus food poisoning, which is usually 1 to 6 hours after eating contaminated food. Next slide. The investigation identified several contributing factors to this outbreak. Firstly, a poor hygiene was observed. For instance, dirty floor, food preparation areas, and sinks, which can serve as potential sources of contamination. Secondly, there was evidence of cross-contamination. The same pot was used to prepare rice, egg, and sambal, which likely facilitated the spread of Staphylococcus aureus. And lastly, the suspected food was nasi lemak, which had the highest attack rate at 89.6% among those affected. Now I will pass the second case to Aisha.
Okay, so the second case, Staphylococcus aureus food poisoning outbreak among primary religious school students in Bangi, 2017. This outbreak happened on May 2nd, 2017, and it has affected a total of 116 students that had eaten the food prepared in the school canteen. All the infected students developed symptoms like nausea and vomiting, diarrhea, and also abdominal pain. Therefore, an investigation was carried to determine the cause, and from the investigation, we could see that the incubation period range of the microbes fits with Staphylococcus aureus incubation period, which is 2 to 12 hours. Next. Therefore, the study concluded that the suspected food was beef curry, and the contributing factor that causing the outbreak to happen is the unhygienic food handling practiced by the food handlers. And it might be because it might be from the inadequate hand washing and lack of gloves while handling food. So lastly, this outbreak shows that poor hygiene and improper food handling can easily lead to Staphylococcus aureus food poisoning. That's why the Ministry of Health and KKM made basic food handling training and hygiene practice mandatory for all food handlers to prevent future incidents. So lastly, the conclusion will be covered by Kamarina.
To conclude, Staphylococcus aureus food poisoning remains a major foodborne illness caused by heat-stable enterotoxin. Although most cases are mild and resolved with supportive care, prevention should be taken through a good hygiene, a safe food handling, and proper storage. And authorities should emphasize a strict SOP to prevent another outbreak in the future. And we also include a few citations for further references. Thank you and Assalamualaikum.